Welcome to the New Yorker Radio Hour. It's good
Thanks
to see you, Dana.
It's good to be here.
I've got to figure that our audience, let me put it to you this way, not all of them watch UFC fights regularly.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And
but I think you would also be surprised in who is and who isn't a UFC fan.
so where does this all come from? We know about the origins of boxing. People have been fighting forever for sport and otherwise. This form of fighting comes from where?
In the early 90s, a bunch of television guys, local guy here from New York named Bob Meyerowitz, got together and said, let's answer the age-old question of which fighting style is the best. We put a boxer against a wrestler, kung fu versus karate, and all these type of things. And they did the first one, and it rivaled the WWE and boxing pay-per-views at the time. So they were like, wow, we got something here. So they did another one and another one. What they never realized at the time is that they were building a sport. And the answer to that age-old question is no one fighting style is the best. You have to have a little piece of everything to be a complete fighter. And Bruce Lee was saying that in the 60s.
So I went to see, when I was a kid, on what was called closed circuit in a movie theater, Muhammad Ali fight a Japanese wrestler, I think.
That's right.
And the wrestler just stayed on his back and kept kicking Ali in the shins.
Yep.
It was not exciting, I got to tell you.
It's very true.
But UFC has what kind of rules? You get into this octagon, 2 men or 2 women, and then what?
So what you're saying is exactly right. When you started pitting style versus style, it wasn't very exciting, and there was a lot of stalling. And when we bought the UFC back in 2001, we ran toward regulation, meaning to have the athletic commissions in each state oversee us.
What are the rules for the uninitiated? 2 fighters get into the octagon, this kind of padded ring with a kind of a fence around it. And then I've got these gloves that aren't quite boxing gloves on me. Maybe they protect my hands, maybe they don't.
They do. That's right.
And then you just go in and you'll forgive me, you go to beat the living crap out of the other guy. What's allowed, what's not? Because in boxing, you can't hit below the belt.
Right.
There's
you
all
can't
kinds
do
of
that
rules.
here. There's most of the same type of rules, except this can go to the ground where you can use submissions. You can strike on the ground.
What's a submission?
A submission is where probably
what used to be called the sleeper hold in professional wrestling.
That's what I was just going to say. Probably the best one is called the rear naked choke, where you get the choke in, and the guy either taps out or he goes to sleep. So the sleeper hold
goes to sleep is a euphemism.
Right. No. You. So what you do is the carotid arteries, the choke closes the carotid arteries, which slows the blood flow to the brain and makes you go to sleep.
Okay, I think I just sensed a lot of people passing out at home. So how dangerous is this compared to boxing and the other martial arts?
This is how dangerous it is. 30 years, never had a death or serious injury. Cheerleading can't say that, okay? And 6 to 7 boxers die a year.
Nobody's ever died.
30 years. When you spend the money on the proper medical attention before they get in, during the fight, and after the fight, you eliminate a lot of the risks in the sport.
What about injury down the line? We all know the effects of football, CTEs and the rest. And, I've met a lot of boxers who might have their wits about them when they're active, but years later, you've met them too.
Absolutely.
Floyd Patterson, Muhammad Ali, many, many other fighters that I've met and tried to interview, they've really lost it. And it's very clear that this is the result of, just repetitive blows to the head.
Yep, absolutely.
Are you saying that UFC is free of that?
No. Anytime you're taking shots to the head, it is very bad for you.
So how do you justify it?
You don't. You have grown adults who choose to do this for a living, and this is what they want to do. They make this. It's not like that thing that went on in the NFL where they thought helmets were protecting their brains.
Right.
They
became a weapon.
That goes into this knows that getting punched in the head is bad for you.
Yeah. What's the appeal to you? How did you get into this?
So I was, a big fan of boxing and grew up loving boxing. It was my favorite sport. And I went to high school with these guys, the Fertitta brothers. They own Station Casinos in Las Vegas, like the 4th largest gaming company.
You grew up in the East Coast and then you moved to Las Vegas,
I moved to Las Vegas when I was in 5th grade. And I ended up going to high school with these guys. And one night, Frank Fertitta and I were at the Hard Rock in Las Vegas. And there was a fighter there named John Lewis who fought in the UFC, and he had a jiu-jitsu school. And Frank said, I've always wanted to learn jiu-jitsu. So we went over and talked to him. We set up a private lesson on Monday, and we became obsessed. We started training, 4 or 5 times a week in jiu-jitsu. And through that, we started to meet a lot of the fighters that fought in the UFC, and we were blown away. Most of these guys, it wasn't the same story as boxing. Boxing story is, I came from the mean streets of such and such, and if it wasn't for boxing, I'd be dead or in jail.
Right.
The complete opposite with UFC fighters.
Why would that be?
Because when you think about, if your parents put you in martial arts when you were young, your parents had money.
Yeah.
And martial arts training isn't cheap, and a lot of these guys were college wrestlers, so they all went to college. Like Chuck Liddell. Do you know who Chuck Liddell is?
Yeah.
So
tell everybody.
The stereotypical ultimate fighter, if you saw him, he's got a mohawk, big mean looking guy with a Fu Manchu, and he's got Chinese writing tattooed on the side of his head. He looks like an axe murderer if you saw the guy. He graduated from Cal Poly with an honors degree in accounting. So these were the type of guys that were fighting in the UFC, and I thought that their stories were very interesting. And the truth is, if you've ever been to a UFC fight, anybody who's listening right now that's been, it is the most exciting live sporting event you will ever see. There's so many different ways to win and lose, and just the energy and the buzz inside the building is
What do you
amazing.
mean there's so many ways to win and lose?
So in boxing, I punch you to the head or body more times than you punch me to the head or body, and I win, or I knock you out. In the UFC, you can do all of that too, but you can also kick, knee, elbow, punch. It can go to the ground where you fight for submissions. So it's nonstop action.
Tell me this, Dana. I wrote a book about Muhammad Ali long ago. I think we both agree he might be the greatest even athlete who ever lived, certainly the most exciting in my lifetime, or human.
Yeah.
Who's the Muhammad Ali of the UFC in your estimation, and why?
We have a guy named Conor McGregor, who I would say is like our Muhammad Ali.
Right.
But if you're looking for your Michael Jordan, it would be John Jones, who is the greatest.
Now, why is that? Tell us about John Jones and why he.
So John Jones is in his 40s now. He's undefeated still. He's never been beat, and he's moved up and down weight classes. It's very, very unique and hard to be undefeated in the UFC.
How did you buy UFC? Because you seem to, in retrospect, have bought it for a song.
Yeah, $2 million. So when we were training in jiu-jitsu and we started to meet a lot of the fighters, I started to manage some of the guys. And I got into a contract dispute with the old owner, Bob Meyerowitz. And Bob said, you know what? There is no more money, okay? I don't even know if I can afford to put on the next event. We hung up and I said, wow, that's interesting. I called my partners, Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta, and said, I just got off the phone with the owner of the UFC. I think they're going bankrupt. They're in trouble. We should buy them.
Wasn't it kind of risky? You had Senator John McCain, who's nobody's idea of a wimp, God knows, call MMA human cockfighting.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah. I think that without Senator John McCain, I probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you right now.
Tell me why.
Because I think his stance on the UFC drove them toward, and not only them, but us when we bought it, toward regulation and being regulated by the athletic commissions in each state. This many people want to see a freak show. This many people want to see a real sport. So
what separated it from the old form to the new form? What were the regulations that were put into place? It used to be banned in 36 states.
Well, here's what happened. Well, think about this. It wasn't allowed on pay-per-view. You as a grown adult didn't have the option to buy it on porn. Was on pay-per-view. UFC was not allowed. So when we bought it for $2 million, our goal was to get it back on free television, which everybody thought was impossible.
So what were the regulations put into place so that it was no longer a freak show?
So what sort of tripped them up early was them sensationalizing it like 2 men enter the octagon, 1 man leaves, the most brutal, bloody, violent sport in the world. There are no rules. There's this,
But that's just hype.
Right.
You hear that in boxing too.
But at the time, And I was involved in boxing, and when the first one was coming, nobody believed it was true. There's no way this could be real, that this is going to happen. And it was real. It did happen, and everybody tuned in because of the sensationalism.
Right.
But that eventually ended up biting him in the end.
How so?
Because Senator John McCain went after it and said, this is disgusting. Think about, at this time, and again, when you and I grew up, right? John Wayne movie. John Wayne would hit a guy. Right? Guy would go down. John Wayne didn't jump on top of him and start pounding him. He'd stand him back up and he'd hit him again. You didn't do that. You didn't jump on a guy when he was down. You didn't hit a man when he was down.
What do you tell the referees? At what point do the referees jump in and stop the proceedings? Because sometimes somebody will go down and then the other fighter will jump on him and start punching him mercilessly in the head.
Yep.
It's the fighter's job to keep going, I assume.
Well,
it's the referee's job to do what?
It's the fighter's job to protect himself at all times. And if the referee feels like he can't anymore and the fight needs to be stopped, he stops it. No different than boxing. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've seen some boxing fights where the guy's out on his feet.
Yeah, but I've seen some terrible refereeing.
I agree. You'll see it in the UFC too. There's terrible refereeing sometimes in the UFC.
But you're saying it's terrible because they're too hesitant to stop it or too quick to stop it?
Both. So sometimes they're too quick, sometimes they're too late. There's terrible refereeing in boxing, UFC, basketball, the NFL. I mean, you're always going to have some human error.
What is the breakdown of fans, men and women?
Well, a lot more women now than there was in the beginning. In the beginning,
because you have women fighters too.
My base was males 18 to 34. I mean, it was a no-brainer. And then over the last, really. I went through COVID, right? I don't own brick and mortar. All I need to do is set up an octagon somewhere and beam it. Back then I was on ESPN, beam it to ESPN. And our business grew like 77% during COVID. And a lot of them were women.
I've noticed that there are a lot of foreign-born fighters in the UFC, and a lot of them come from Dagestan, Georgia, Chechnya, Uzbekistan. Why is the Caucasus such a seedbed for the UFC? Yeah,
if you came from anywhere that ends in stan, you're a tough human being.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. Is it a challenge to try to market the UFC when you have so many foreign fighters, or it doesn't really matter?
No. People ask me, what about foreign? What about language barriers? What about this? You can be a deaf mute, okay? If you are the baddest man or woman in the world, people want to watch you. If you have that Conor McGregor, that Muhammad Ali thing, I mean, that's just a...
Okay, tell me about Conor
McGregor.
What does Conor McGregor have that separates him out?
He has that ability that when he walks into a room, people just are fascinated by them, to listen to them. They're funny. They have incredible magnetic personalities.
And they're real personalities, or are they put on in the way that pro wrestlers of my childhood and then after really
Some are. Yeah. Some have the thing that they turn on when they're... Conor McGregor has. Like Muhammad Ali was the same guy in the living room with his wife and kids that he was when you saw him on TV. Yeah. And Conor McGregor's the same.
Why do you think UFC has taken off now? What is it about the culture, the other sports, the media sphere? Why now?
Well, I have this philosophy that no matter what color you are, what country you come from, what language you speak, we're all human beings, and fighting's in our DNA. We get it and we like it. Even a sophisticated guy like you that writes for the New Yorker and whatever, if a fight broke out in here right now, it would create this sort of energy in here with you and I, and we'd be like, oh, wow. And we would watch the fight play out.
Right.
It's just
humans, in us. You think it's just in us?
It's in us, absolutely. 100%.
Is that something ugly in us?
I don't know about ugly. We're all fighters. Even everybody listening to this show right now, we get up every day and we battle something. We all have to fight. Right, when you get out of bed every morning, life is standing right there to kick you in the face.
I've noticed. I've noticed.
And it could be as soon as you get outside, you got a flat tire.
Dana, I think you got to give me credit for going 17 minutes or whatever it is without mentioning Donald Trump's name. But you're associated with him.
I'm not associated with him. He's
You
one of
are.
my very, very
Okay.
good friends.
Okay, you spoke for him at the nominating conventions.
Yep.
I think at the victory celebration, you were one of the speakers right there with him.
Which I didn't see coming. That was not planned. And
Why? What? Tell me a bit about the origins of your relationship with Donald Trump. I don't know if it's political in origin or just maybe it's
furthest
just
thing
UFC.
from political.
Tell me.
So when we started this, all the things that we've talked about in buying and building the UFC. Now, imagine if this wasn't allowed on pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine venues, right? Arenas did not want us.
Yeah.
Right? What kind of people would show up to see an event like this, human cockfighting? So Donald Trump owned the Atlantic City casinos at the time, and he had us come to the Taj Mahal for the first fight that we did, UFC 30. We did UFC 30 and UFC 31 at the Taj Mahal.
What year is this?
2001. Mm-hmm. He showed up for the first fight of the night and stayed till the end, both times that we went there. And every good thing that ever happened to me in my career after that, he was always the first guy to reach out and say, congratulations. I always knew this was going to be big. I knew you were going to.
What did he like about it?
Well, I think he's a fight fan. You know, you want to talk about a fighter. I mean, that guy's a fighter. One of the, most resilient human beings I've ever met in my life. And he had the big Tyson fights and boxing matches at his place. So he's a fight fan. And the guy has always been a good friend to me. And then in 2015, when he decided he was going to run, he reached out to me and he said, I would be honored if you'd speak for me. Well, this is the way he said it. He called me and said, if you don't want to do this, I completely understand, but I would be honored if you would speak for me at the Republican convention. And everybody told me not to do it.
Well, Dana, tell me a little bit what your politics were like up until then. And what was your sense of his politics up until then?
I would say that my politics have always been common sense, down the middle, leaning a little left. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say I was.
In what sense?
In my 20s, my late teens and 20s, I spent in Massachusetts, which is very liberal. Mm-hmm. I would consider myself a 80s, 90s Democrat.
Have you changed over time politically?
No, I haven't changed.
So you remain a kind of center-left Democrat?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Do you talk politics with Trump, or did you before the first convention?
No.
That wasn't a currency of your conversation, of your relationship.
Look at any of my speeches at the conventions or any of that, I don't ever say the left is wrong or the left is bad or the left is this. I spoke about who he is as a person and as a friend and as a human being, because a lot of the narrative that they put out there about him and who he is as a person is gross.
But doesn't he
absolutely positively not true.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit too. I think it's fair to say that if he has that reputation, it doesn't come from outer space.
Oh, it does. It comes from politics. That's where it comes from.
Doesn't it come from some of his rhetoric and some of his way of treating people and talking about people?
No, I think that, listen, did I wish that back in the day he'd stay off Twitter a little bit more and things like, listen, he's a tough guy and he's not afraid to give his opinion, but he's been talking about politics since he was young. I mean, if you look back at him, but these things that he's a racist and he's a Nazi and he's this and that. I mean, Donald Trump, all this stuff's coming out now. The Michael movie just came out, and you see all these videos now popping up of Trump defending Michael Jackson and the type of person that he was, and that Michael Jackson was around his children and around his family a lot.
Wait a minute, Dana. Michael Jackson, as talented as he was, as brilliant as he was a deeply, deeply flawed human being,
no
to say the least,
it.
and was abusive. Everything we know about him.
Wait. He was
toward
abusive?
Kids, yes, it's terrible.
I don't know if that's true. But I can tell you that, the president had a very good relationship with Michael Jackson and had Michael Jackson around his kids all the time, and defended him when that stuff was going down.
Do you ever talk politics with the president?
To call the guy a racist is crazy. He's not a racist.
Well, how do you look? I don't want to go on endlessly about Donald Trump because then that's all we'll do. But when he puts out a video that shows the Obamas as apes, and then won't even apologize for it, you don't get the willies from that?
No, I've been around the guy so much,
but that doesn't give you pause, Dana?
As far as what?
About his views just about his way he talks about other human beings, much less race.
But if that's the way if he was that type of a person, first of all, I became friends with this guy, never even imagining that he would be the president of the United States someday.
Right.
And if he was that type of person, I would never associate with that type of a person, no matter who he was or who he thinks he is.
But if he does that, how is he not that kind of person?
He's not.
But do you know something that I know? In other words, what you're telling me is that you kind of know, of course you know him better personally, but he's the most transparent personality we have in public life. He talks to the press all the time. He's on social media all the time. It seems sometimes there's nothing that we don't know about him.
Very true.
So he's almost as apparent to me as he is to you.
And I don't know about the Obama thing to speak. To speak on it. I've never seen it. I didn't know that, but I can tell you this: he's not a racist. He's not a fascist. He loves this country, and if you're an American, race, religion, whatever it is, President Trump is on your team. That I guarantee you.
There's another person you have a very close relationship with. In fact, you hired him as an announcer, color commentator, as Joe Rogan. Tell me about him, because I listen to him from time to time. I've written about him, but he's now that he's hugely famous, he's kind of protective of himself and his brand. Tell me about your relationship with him.
So when we bought the company was based here in New York. So I flew from Vegas to New York, got into the office, and I had to start cleaning out the office, and there were videotapes everywhere. So I had to figure out what was important to send back to Vegas and what I was going to throw away. So I literally watched hundreds of tapes. And one of the tapes that I popped in, and the way that Joe spoke about the UFC and how fighters in the UFC would match up against some of these Hollywood action stars, I was like, this guy's great. This is exactly who I need.
Because his talent is what?
So his talent is he's a martial artist.
Right.
And black belt in jiu-jitsu. So the hardest part in selling this thing, the Fertittas that I knew, everybody understands the stand-up. Punching and kicking, everybody gets. But as soon as it hits the ground, people have no idea what's going on.
What do you mean?
As far as setting up submissions, like you said, the sleeper hold.
So it's more hidden and more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The technical side of the ground game, Joe was brilliant, and he's a really good speaker. Mm-hmm. So he could walk you through what was happening seconds before it even happened. And he was great at speaking publicly about the UFC and about the athletes and about so when we first bought the company, I flew all over the country meeting with editors of newspapers. Because remember, newspapers were the king then.
Right.
So all these guys were 60 to 65 years old that I was talking to. All they cared about was ball and stick sports and sometimes boxing. You know what I mean? And the truth of the matter was there was no room for UFC in the papers. Mm-hmm. So I had to buy my way onto radio. Radio was still very relevant then. So we would do these satellite radio tours. And what we learned is fighters are not good radio. All right. They'd show up late. Uh-huh. They'd still sound like they were sleeping. There was nothing exciting. So me and Joe Rogan had to do all these radio tours. Now we're on the West Coast.
Yeah.
We had to wake up at 3:00 in the morning because they're going to drop us into the East Coast at 6:00 drive time. So then we'd go East Coast, Midwest, and then the tour would end on the West Coast. Our start all started on radio.
So he worked for you for quite a while, and then he obviously has his his podcast, which is gigantic. My understanding is that you were instrumental in getting him to endorse Donald Trump this last time around. Tell me that story.
Yeah, so I tried to connect him and Trump, for like probably 6 years.
Was Rogan wary of Trump in some way?
Yeah,
Why?
Rogan didn't want to be political.
Uh-huh.
He did not want to get into politics. He did not want to be political. And his thing was all, but then he had Bernie Sanders on.
That's right. He was kind of pro Bernie Sanders.
Very.
Yeah.
And even when I talked to him about Trump going on the podcast, he says, well, okay, I'm going to invite Kamala too.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Get it. Love it. And early on, I started telling the president, if you stay on Fox and only Fox, you're going to lose. Because most of the people on Fox are already voting for you, and every other network says horrible things about you. You got to start getting into podcasts.
And who is he going to reach when he goes on Joe Rogan, in your view?
Well, it wasn't just Joe Rogan. It was other podcasters, which
right.
He was picking me up in Las Vegas, and we were flying to Arizona for a rally. And there's a group called the Nelk Boys that I had created a relationship with. They're young kids that do pranks, and they're YouTubers, influencers. And I called Jared Kushner and I said, I want to bring this group of kids, the Nelk Boys, on Air Force One with us to Arizona. And Jared Kushner says, well, you're asking him that. I'm not. And so I called him and he said, yeah, let's do it. So we get in there and these guys are all excited because they're Trump fans and, they're kids. So they're, at one point he looks at me and he's like, are you kidding me right now? Are you serious? And we're all in there taking pictures. To his brilliance, we go to the rally. He does the rally and he's leaving the stage and the YMCA thing's playing and he sees one of the kids whose name is Steve Will Do It. And he's going crazy. The president calls him up on stage with him and the whole crowd erupts and they start doing the YMCA thing. It was the most viral thing on the internet that day. And then he got it. The power of these kids that most people don't know.
Right.
The media is all starting to get into it now, which
right. It's not 60 Minutes. It's not the mainstream newspapers.
By the time the media catches up, it's
over.
Yeah. So we then we got him on their podcast, and the podcast did something like 8 million views in 4 hours, and YouTube pulled it down, and all hell broke loose. That's when the whole thing started with social media and all that stuff. But he got it.
If I understand, you called Rogan as the campaign between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump was winding down. You called Rogan, I think, and you said, "Are you going to endorse or not?" What happened?
Yes.
Tell me about that conversation.
I was flying to Mar-a-Lago, me and Frank Fertitta, for election night, and he had done the podcast, and the podcast was blowing up, pulling huge numbers. And I texted him and said, "Are you voting for Trump?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Then endorse. Why have you not endorsed him?"
What did he say?
He said, "I'm just busy. I'm this, I'm that."
I'm busy.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm busy?"
Yeah.
Please. Yeah. So what happened?
He endorsed.
You think, so that was you. It's on you.
Is it on me?
But you gave him the extra shove.
Yeah, well, I had been working on him for a few years.
So now, these days, I'm sure you've noticed, he's pretty critical of Trump. Now, he was thrilled to see him endorse hallucinogens and Ibogaine. But he's been very tough on him on a number of issues, including ICE, the war in Iran. Do you agree with Rogan on this?
I think that anybody who is the president of the United States, you're never going to agree with 100% of what they do.
But what do you disagree with Donald Trump?
Me and Donald Trump are friends.
I get. So you have this. You're saying we're friends.
I don't have a transactional relationship.
No, I get
with
that,
Trump.
but you don't want to express any disagreement. Be honest with me. Between on the air.
No, it's not that. I just told you before. I wish I could take his Twitter away. Sometimes in the past, I know who this guy is, and
do you agree with him on Iran?
But we, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a political guy. I'm not a political guy.
You're on speaking at the conventions. You're at the triumphant victory party.
And what did I say? What did I say when I was at those?
No, they were congratulatory. They were personal for sure.
100%.
They weren't policy-oriented speeches.
Absolutely personal speeches. They weren't political in any way, shape, or form.
You think it would be disloyal, you're saying?
What would be?
To criticize him in any way?
No. Not to criticize him. I'm not saying that I agree with all his policies.
But you want to keep that general, not specific, is what you're saying.
Me, personally? Yeah. You know what I do? I can control my little world that I live in my bubble, my employees, my fighters, my family, and my friends.
You're about to have an extraordinary event in Washington. You're going to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence with a UFC fight event on the White House lawn. And I've heard the weigh-ins may take place at the Lincoln Memorial. Is that true?
Correct.
Tell me about that event, its origins, and what you hope to do.
Yeah, so we were at a fight, and I can't remember if it was in New Jersey or Miami, we being me and the president, and he leans over to me in the middle of the fight and goes, "We should do a fight at the White House." I said, Yes, we should. I'm in. And he's like, "I think it would be great to have an event for America's 250th. And so literally that was a Saturday. On Monday, the White House started calling saying, let's start getting the logistics.
And you're in charge.
Set up and
How's it going to work? Who are you going to have fight?
So every fight actually means something and matters in the division. 2 world titles on the line. And stylistically, it should be a great fight.
What's it going to look like? I've seen sketches.
Yeah, so
it looks like a fight in outer space with the White House there.
So here's what happened. And the reason that it looks like that is I don't want to see a light, a screen, a microphone. All I want to see is the White House, the entire White House, and the monument if the fight goes the other way. Mm-hmm. So we had to build this thing that we are calling the Claw. It is the lighting grid.
And how many people are going to be in the stands around it?
So there will be a little over 4,000. The president has 1,000 tickets. I have 200 tickets, and Ari Emanuel has 200 tickets. And the rest are going to all the different branches of the military of the 4,000 people that will be there. And then in the Ellipse, which is a park right across the street from the White House, there'll be 85,000 people.
So how are you going to broadcast this?
So we just signed a new 7-year deal with Paramount Plus, and all of our content is there.
Do you notice people on the other side of the aisle, Democrats, liberals, trying to show up at UFC fights, befriend you, or are you concerned that you have a kind of partisan image?
No, we haven't had anybody. But
and why do you suppose that is?
I would never disrespect or turn anybody away. You know what I mean?
I get that, but it's interesting to see them show up at Joe Rogan's microphone, and they might go to a baseball game or might go to a World Series game or an NBA playoff game, but they're keeping their distance from UFC?
Yeah, I don't think they're keeping their distance. I think that the difference with President Trump is he was a day one fan. I mean, this guy's been a fan since day one. Gave us that opportunity to come to the Taj Mahal. And you saw it with Obama. Obama's a fan of the NBA. Mm-hmm. So he showed up at NBA games and
not UFC.
Yeah, and
has Obama been to
Bush
UFC?
Too. I mean, Bush is a baseball fan.
No,
Bush,
I know, but has Obama or ever showed up at a UFC fight? I'm just curious.
No.
Yeah.
No, but at the inauguration, I was sitting behind all the ex-presidents.
I saw that.
Yeah, and there was some things that went out online and it said, "Oh, look at Dana Mad Dog and Obama and all this other stuff." President Obama turned around and said to me, "Congratulations on all your success. I'm really happy for you." And I said, "Thank you, Mr. President."
That must have made you feel good.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
You were just at the White House Correspondents Dinner, and you were quoted as saying, and I don't want to take this out of context. I'll let you tell the story. You said, "It was awesome." Yeah. Now, that could have been, it was pretty horrible. What did you mean by it was awesome?
So I was sitting there talking to Pete Hegseth,
the Secretary of Defense.
Yes.
Or War, depending on your...
Yes. Yeah. And, we were talking about all this fascinating stuff. And all of a sudden...
Well, you can't go that fast. What was the fascinating stuff?
We were talking about Iran and what's going on over there.
And what was he telling you?
I'll leave that alone. So
I make a living at this.
I understand, sir. I understand. All of a sudden, you start hearing just crashing, like plates and dishes and glasses. Turn around, and what looked like 50 Secret Service guys kicking tables over, running on the top of tables, and they're screaming, "Everybody get on the ground." And I was like, oh my God. Then I watched them pull Vance and Trump off the stage. They clear the stage, and then literally the entire stage are guys with guns with lights on them pointed at us.
Right.
Now, the Secret Service guys are coming toward our table. I was the first table in front of the stage, and we don't know what's going on. Is there a shooter? Is there a bomb? And just the adrenaline in your body, in mine anyway, was off the charts. I mean, it was, they're saying, get down, get down. First of all, I'm never a get down kind of guy, okay? That's never going to happen. If there's something going on here, I got a bad news for my family. It's going to be a closed casket, okay? Because I'm not getting shot in the back laying on the ground. And these guys came in, and how fast they moved through this place. It was just, now being another man, tell me the greatest movie you ever saw with those type, just on steroids. I mean, it was now to
Dana, it wasn't a movie.
I know, which made it even greater. And when it was over, I was like, for 4 hours, I was bouncing off the walls. I was just, and
what did Hegseth do?
The fact that
with Hegseth they dragged off.
Let me tell you what Hegseth didn't do. He didn't get on the ground either. He was sitting right next to me, and then his wife was with him, and then he ended up taking his wife out of there.
But you stayed.
Oh yeah. Well, I had to stay. Nobody's
dragging you off.
No, nobody dragged me off. Yeah, we had to stay in there. And I'll tell you this too. So you had the who's who from politics, the who's who from the media, and the who's who in business in this room, and lots of far left liberal media, which were a lot of women. None of these women were screaming. None of these women were getting, overly excited about this thing. And then when it was over and we knew that the threat was over, everybody just started getting together and talking. It was pretty badass and pretty impressive.
You weren't scared at all?
Never.
Not even for Trump's sake, or
no? They had the.
You thought that was
they
under
had
control.
them out of there pretty quick.
Yeah.
And
what did you think Trump was going to say that night about the press?
Well, he tried to come back. He wanted to finish it. He wanted to do, the event, and Secret Service wouldn't let him. I'm sure there were a lot of far left women in there that probably don't like me or think that I.
What counts for far left for you? What do you mean?
In the media, CNN. We all got together after that, and everybody was talking, and there's just this level of camaraderie and just that
buzz.
Holy shit, what we just went through, kind of thing. And the fact that you could experience something like that and nobody got hurt, but to be in it and see it play out like you would see in a movie, but actually experience it was hopefully a one of one, but an incredible experience.
Have you talked to President Trump since then?
I was with him last night. I had dinner with him last night.
And how'd that dinner go? What'd you talk about?
It was great. Well, there were other people at he opened the Rose Garden last night, and he had his first dinner out there. And I flew in and had dinner with him, and then flew here.
What do you talk about?
I just talk about anything that you would normally talk to your friend about. What's new? How's the family? Movies? How you been? He looked great. He looks like he's in good shape right now. And
so you don't buy the business of he's around 80 and it's not easy being president. It's not easy being 80, and that his health is lousy. You don't see that.
His health is far from lousy.
Tell me about that.
Far from lousy. And this isn't the Biden, buddies of his backing him up saying he's whatever. He looks like he's in better shape than the last time I saw him, and he was on point last night.
Do you worry about his presidency? His popularity is at a record low for other presidents too. Where do you think he is at this point?
I think that he's got 3 more years left. And again,
2.5, but who's counting?
you judge him when it's over, when his run is over and he moves on, and you look back at what he accomplished and what he's done. I think there's a lot of things that he's obviously never going to get credit for because, if you don't like him, you don't like him. But
what do you give him credit for as president?
Securing our borders. I mean, how do you not give him credit for that? The Middle East. Look at the work he did in the Middle East during his first term. And
you're referring to the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, of course.
And now?
Yeah. I mean, the Middle East is a tricky place to navigate, and I think he does a better job than most.
I get the sense, Dana, that to some degree you'll be glad not to have to answer questions about Donald Trump when he's out of office.
No, I think
that you want to be a loyal friend.
No.
And when it comes to the specifics of his politics, you'd rather. I get it.
No.
Am I wrong?
No, not at all.
Go ahead.
People can ask me about Donald Trump for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I'll tell you all the great things that I love about this guy. What I'll be happy to be out of is politics. Yeah, I don't want to talk about politics, whether they're his, Obama's, this guy, that guy, none of them.
Now, you made a huge deal with the UFC. A huge deal. How much did you come away with?
$7.7 billion.
You, personally?
Oh, no. The company, yeah.
And how about you?
Yeah. I do really well. I do really well.
That was great. You want to give me another shot on that one?
Yeah.
Are you a billionaire now?
No.
Close. And you recently...
I spend too much money. I'll never be a billionaire.
It's really funny. But I've watched you play poker on television and other games of chance. And the bets on the table are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and sometimes on a single bet over $1 million if they'll take the bet.
Right.
Are you out of your mind?
Yes.
You're married, right?
Yes.
How does your wife feel about these bets?
Yeah, my wife's doing okay too. She, we don't have a lot to complain about.
No, but you know that in the end the house wins, right?
Yeah. And in the end, you only live once.
You have a personal life, obviously friendships. You look like you're
kids.
in good shape.
I got kids. Thank you.
What do you do to keep jacked?
Yeah, so I work out. Listen, when you turn, like you said, mid-50s.
Tell me about it.
Trying not to get fat, and I'm trying not to get hurt. Those are my two goals every day. And live the best quality of life that I can. I like spending time. I just went to the Kentucky Derby for the first time with my wife and kids. And
did you put down a bet?
I did, yeah.
How'd you do?
I didn't do well. I didn't do.
How much did you put down?
I put down 70,000.
Now, how big is gambling in your line of business with UFC?
Oh, it's big, yeah. I mean, betting on fights, sports betting, period, is massive right now.
Now, how do you?
I do not sports bet though.
But how do you ensure? How do you keep it clean? How do you keep it on the up and up?
Yeah, we've had those problems too. Not with the mob or any of that kind of stuff, but we've had
new versions of
a couple of betting issues. Yeah, but we have a company called U.S. Integrity that watches this type of stuff, and
that's a private company that
they let us know whenever
the state doesn't get involved.
No. So we had an issue where we saw some irregular betting going on,
right? And
we called the FBI.
So tell me the story. What does irregular betting mean in this context?
It means when you have a fight that isn't like the main event and the line starts to move a lot.
Mm-hmm. But that's the indicator in fighting, that the line moves, so there's the suspicion that somebody's about to throw a fight.
100%. There's something fishy going on when an undercard fight and a line starts moving.
Particularly the undercard, not the headliners.
Yeah, because the headliners are very high profile and lots of people are betting on it, and it can happen there too, but it's a lot more noticeable when it happens on a prelim fight.
Now, you're also in the boxing business. You've just recently launched a new boxing company called
Zuffa.
Zuffa. What does Zuffa mean, by the way?
To fight in Italian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My impression has been that with some exceptions in recent years, boxing is certainly not what it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And
80s or 90s.
Or 80s or 90s. Is boxing declining? And if so, why are you getting into it?
Yeah, I think that boxing has been broken for a long time for a lot of different reasons. And I love the sport. And I've always talked about jumping in and trying to sort of, put my spin on boxing and try to see what I could do with it. And everything in life is about timing. And the timing just worked out, in the last year. And so far, so good. I'm having fun with it. What I want to do is try to rip it apart, build it from the ground up, and see what I can do with it over the next 5 years.
Final question on a matter of incredible importance. You said that in some ways your sport was the result of the imaginative games that we used to play about, would this boxer beat that wrestler? Your biggest fighter is Conor, right? And does he beat Sugar Ray Robinson?
Well, it's different. I mean,
or has this sport put the lie to all of that?
Yeah, I mean, boxer versus Sugar Ray Robinson gets murdered by Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor gets murdered by Sugar Ray Robinson. If he comes here and if he goes
if they're
there,
on the common ground.
Two completely different sports.
Got it. All right. I hope you come back. This was fun.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.